Hello, good evening, everybody. Just going to allow our speakers to unmute themselves when the time comes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. The new year has certainly brought upon us continued measures that are undoubtedly affecting us all. But in spite of all those recent challenges, we are honored to be with you all now safely at home. Backed by popular demand, tonight is a collaboration between Ascari Hospitality Group, Stratus Vineyards, and our new presenting partner, Somm. But let me start off first by saying we are so moved and humbled by the overwhelming support from all of you. You truly are our raison d'etre to continue doing what we love to do. These events are so special as we connect you with world-class wineries, the winemakers, an inspired meal, and you get to sit front row center in the comforts of home. My name is Kathleen. I'm the Director of Virtual Events here at Ascari Hospitality Group. Before we begin, just a couple quick housekeeping notes. We are going to be about an hour this evening, and we're a pretty large group tonight, so we ask that you continue to keep your mics on mute throughout the hour. Feel free, though, to type in your questions at any time into the chat feature, and we will be sure to have your question answered with our guest speakers. For those of you joining us for the first time, a quick bit of history and also some brief updates for all of you. Ascari Hospitality Group is a Toronto-based restaurant company, and over the course of the past 20 pretty unpredictable months, our fearless leaders and dedicated team of hospitality professionals have been so busy designing new ways of continuing to engage with you. From at-home experiences like this to full-service live gatherings when we are able to again, either on-site at Ascari at one of our restaurants or a private affair at your location, Ascari's events and catering division covers everything from your corporate needs to celebrating life's special moments and everything else in between. In the retail space, many of you already know we have a bustling online shop and now an accompanying brick and mortar store located in Leslieville called Mercatino e Vini. There you will find both Ascari's house-made delicious signature prepared foods and also a beautiful selection of carefully curated food and wine products. We're also happy to announce that as of February 2nd, our restaurants are reopening again. So please be sure to make a reservation next time you wish to dine out. At Ascari, we are so and have always been incredibly passionate about providing quality service and genuine hospitality. There are more ways than ever to experience Ascari's trademark warmth and excellence. So be sure to visit our newly relaunched website, ascarihg.com, and follow us on Instagram at AscariHG to stay up to date with programming such as our upcoming Valentine's and Family Day weekend offerings. And coming very soon, we have our own wine subscription club, which comes with fun perks and interactive sessions. So get in touch and be our guest. We look forward to impressing you. Okay, so let's move on to our presentation for the evening. Our moderator for the discussion tonight is Ascari Hospitality Group's executive chef and co-owner, John Sinopoli. Chef John has been cooking since the late 90s, completing his culinary program in New York City in 2001, moved back to Toronto in 2003, and since 2005, he and his partner, Eric Joyal, have been proprietors in the Toronto restaurant scene, opening 9 unique venues and concepts since then. This year, he accepted the 32nd Annual Pinnacle Award for Best Independent Restaurateur. Of course, tonight would not be possible without our presenting partners. Somm is a new lifestyle app that is touted like having a sommelier in your pocket, alongside a loyalty program with benefits you actually want. Membership in their 2 crew levels unlock premium guest experiences at their roster of high caliber partners, including our restaurants, Ascari King West, Ascari Enoteca, and Gardeles Brasserie, as well as Stratus Winery. You can download and use their app for free or upgrade to Somm Crew to access great benefits and experiences. For more information, please visit their website at somm.io. Stratus Vineyards is a renowned sustainable winery in the historic town of Niagara-on-the-Lake that unites tradition and science in its approach. Tonight, we are delighted to have master winemaker Jean-Leroux Groux join us again, this time with his protege, Dean Stoyka, as our featured speakers. A native to France's Loire Valley who learned his craft in the vineyards of Bordeaux and Burgundy, JL is known as one of Niagara's winemaking pioneers as he brought his vision of creating premium New World wines through the old world art of assemblage to Stratus. Dean has lived and worked his entire life in Niagara and was raised in a wine family as his father worked for 41 years in the wine industry, so it's definitely in his blood. In 2010, he pursued his diploma for wine and viticulture and also began his career at Stratus, where he has worked everything from the tasting bar, lab technician, winemaking supervisor, vineyard manager, and assistant winemaker. After working together with JL for 10 years, he was promoted this year to Stratus winemaker. We are so looking forward to hearing about modern twists to the classic style of winemaking with these two. And we'll surely hear from our dear friends at Stratus as well, the always witty Charles Baker and the lovely Susan Janke, both of whose unwavering support and enthusiasm truly bring life to these collaborations. And as well, the founder and CEO of Somm, Jennifer Tremblay, they will join us a little later in tonight's program. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the discussion, see you in the chat, and from all of us, thank you for being with us tonight. Take it away, Chef.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kathleen, for your lovely introduction, as always. Very informative. We are grateful for all the hard work the whole team does to put these events on, and we're very happy, as Kathleen said, to welcome new partners to the table, including Somm, and we have their reps on today too with Jen, and of course, welcome Dean to our first chat with us. Of course, we've spoken with JL again, but it's exciting to talk to the next generation of winemakers. And I think we can start the conversation today with the first thing, which is if you have any questions about what's going on, throw it in the chat. But we're going to talk about the wines. I want to talk about winemaking. We only have an hour. We've got a lot of people on. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions. Of course, we're going to go from the white to the Stratus white to the Stratus red. And then I've got a few questions lined up for Dean and JL, but I would like to encourage everyone to participate. If you have questions about winemaking or about food pairing, about anything, throw it in the chat. We're ready to go there. Wonderful. So JL, Dean, first question this evening. I'd like to talk about the process of assemblage, and I'd love for you guys to explain it to the audience very as succinctly as possible. So I guess I'll throw to JL first, and then Dean, maybe after JL kind of talks about it in general, I'd love you to kind of elucidate what you've learned about it since you started at Stratus, in particular, JL's approach. So JL, for you first, can we just talk about the process in general and what it means?
Yes, certainly, with pleasure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to have such a great audience, even you're lonely in your house, and have great food and great wines together. But yeah, it has been a fantastic journey to be at Stratus, especially when you have to start the winery, start everything from scratch, and be able to have this wonderful opportunity to build the winery of your dreams. So I cannot really complain, because if I complain about what I've been creating here in terms of a winery. So the process has been great because we really started with vineyards, and overall, the vineyard is our foundation. This is where the winery is working for. The winery has been built for the vineyard and not the other way around. So it has been a fantastic process to be able to get this wonderful winery and this great land. Did you hear me?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dean, do you want to add to what you've been learning from JL about assemblage in particular?
For sure. Yeah, and it's something, thanks again, John, and to Ascari and Somm and all of our wonderful guests for having us and hearing this discussion. And as we talked earlier, I did start in 2010, and what struck me right away when I applied and started working with JL is, I did a few tours around wineries and applied to a few places. And when I was walking around and touring Stratus with JL, he was one of the first winemakers to ever say to me, wine is made in the vineyard. It was the first thing he said as we walked around this, beautiful winery and saw all these, innovative, amazing things, tanks on elevators, roto fermenters, just all this great equipment. And the whole time, we barely talked about it. Joe was just going about, wine is made in the vineyard. And we really focus on growing these grapes in the vineyard and then translating that to, of course, the art of assemblage and what I've been learning from JL and learning at my time at Stratus. And being a Niagara resident, that was always something that sort of excited me. I walking around Stratus, hearing wines made in the vineyard, seeing this beautiful facility and this beautiful vineyard, really felt like I kind of grasped this vision that JL was sort of painting. And as he was alluded to, that when he started this winery, I kind of bought in right there. It was like no other winery was going to woo me or convince me to go anywhere else, because I thought, like, this is the vision. I love this idea of the art of assemblage. I love the idea of having 16 varieties planted in this vineyard, 45 different blocks on just 56 acres, and taking all these different unique concepts and styles of wine that we have in the vineyard, bringing them in the winery and making this unique blend that I thought was great. And I particularly thought, for reds, of course, the world is famous for red blends all over the place. What really struck me and caught my attention was the Stratus White, that I've never had a wine like this before. The balance, the complexity, the amount of aromas and flavors, it was just, single varietal whites are amazing, but this white blend was, you can't find that kind of complexity in a white wine. And JL can talk more about how important that is for the complexity and what he does to get that in a white wine, because I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, I love that. I think that it definitely goes against the grain. Most wineries in Ontario are varietal specific, and they focus on making one varietal really, really well, not a ton of blending, especially true assemblage happening. JL, maybe you want to address Glenn's question. He asked us, this is not a traditional blend of varietals. Can you talk about in the 18, what varietals made it into the Stratus White, and what about maybe that vintage in particular, or what about the aromatics in those varietals made you want to create this particular wine?
Sure. Well, Stratus White, yes, you're right, is not a very usual thing, but the philosophy we have at Stratus is our terroir. As Dean talked about, it's all about that. And for us, we are not preoccupied about what variety you put in a wine. The concept is this very old, tradition of making wine, European tradition. And it sounds like very innovative to make white wine with so many different varieties. But we call that the tradition of the future, in fact, because we think this is the future of winemaking. It's the past and it's the future of it as well. So Earth in North America not used to make wine with many varieties together, especially not in white wine. But really what we take is say, well, look, we have so many 6 different varieties in our vineyard. We are going to make a wine representing our terroir. So it's not important what variety, what's important is what it tastes like, what it smells like. And we make this wine by smelling, by tasting, blind tasting, because it's important to be blind when you taste. Otherwise, you have preconceived idea. You are distracted by all kinds of things. So I am myself half blind, so it has to be a lot to be able to taste wine in a very objective environment, if you want. So that's why we use all these varieties, because that's what's growing in our vineyard. That's well adapted to our terroir. When it comes to Stratus White, this Stratus White, the 2018, well, it's double cool. because we are in a cool climate environment, and that was a really cool year. So it's a double cool, definitely. You can smell that, and more importantly, taste it, because in the nose you still have some, some tropical fruit, a bit of that. So that's because even if it was a cool year, we waited long enough to get these aromatics we love to have. They are aromatic that make the wine age. They are very adaptable to a lot of food. That's something we didn't know when created Stratus White. It was very unusual to make a wine with such things. We didn't know it was so friendly to many types of food, but we discovered that since then. And at the end of the day, that wine is made of Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Viognier, a bit of Gewürztraminer, some Semillon. So it's not about the variety. You used to not even mention it. People were very upset with us. They say, how come, we don't want to tell us what's in your wine? Well, what's in my wine is my terroir, is my land. It's not, who cares about the variety? But anyway, that's difficult. So we definitely budged in and finally did put the variety on the back labels. If you look on the back of your bottle, you can see the percentage of varietal. But I used to say, don't talk to me, talk to my computer about these kind of things. So we only.
So I love that, JL, that you're not hung up. I love that you're not hung up on what varietals. You're just choosing what's representing the terroir for every vintage. So Dean, you spoke about the complexity that occurs with this assemblage. Given that 2018 was a very cool year, how did that affect complexity, and what did you guys do in the winery to adjust for the cool climate, or did you just embrace it and not worry about having abundant structure, heat, whatever? Like, tell me what it did to the wine and what you guys did in the winery to adjust.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would point out, we do adjust maybe a few things in the winery, but for the most part, we're kind of set for what we do a lot of times in the winery. We sort of have our idea. What we really do is what we can do in the vineyard in a cool year. And a lot of that has to do canopy management. It might be, how we're managing cropping levels and things like that. So removing leaves, getting some sunlight, especially on a varietal like Viognier or Semillon. It's a cool year. We really, pinpoint that early season. Jail is always very good. We're really into data and looking back through the years, catching, where we are when we start reaching June, July. Is it looking like a cool year? Is it a warm year? Do we have more heat than we need? Or, do we need something to try and help the vines along? So a lot of our decision making sort of happening throughout the season. And we're just sort of rolling with the punches. In 2018 would be definitely that, opening up the canopy, letting some sunlight into these varietals like Viognier, Semillon, and even the Chardonnay benefits from that. It was something, we really patiently wait for the Chardonnay to start getting these translucent skins where you can see straight through to the seeds. The seeds start going brown. So there's a lot of patience that start happening. And when you're, a vineyard manager, and I did that for a few years, you start getting really antsy. Like it's cool. It's a cool year. You want to get the grapes in. And JL usually comes with his patience and says, oh yeah, he could definitely allude to that. Then I'm like, are we ready? Can we pick? Can we go? Let's get it in. And it's, looking a lot at the seeds, the pulp, and the skin to make sure that this wine is ready. And that's where the complexity there from the grapes are coming from. In the winery, certainly we do a lot. We do some skin contact time on the whites. JL has always been a big fan of that. Even, before orange wine was a big thing, we were still doing, 8 hour skin contact, not anything crazy, not weeks and weeks, but we were always looking to get phenolics and complexity from the white wine by keeping some skin contact, keeping the grapes cool. That's another thing that we'll do to try and preserve the freshness, the aromatics. So that's that kind of stuff that we do in the winery. And then the big importance, because we do vinify all these varietals separately, becomes this art of assemblage. So you have, the Gewürztraminer separate, the Semillon separate, the Viognier, they're all made and aged separately. And then comes our tasting. And that's usually happening in April, May. It can last quite a few weeks into the months. And it's, as JL alluded to, completely blind. We don't, it's always an important thing. We say, don't come in with any preconceived ideas or preconceived notions about how this wine should be. Let the art, the assemblage, the wine tell you what it should be. Taste through, and you'll find your way through the darkness into this complex blend. And I get questions all the time from, 2% Gewürztraminer in this wine. Like, why 2% Gewürztraminer? And I used to wonder that when I was young too, like what could 2% do? But then you start to realize the chemistry and how powerful Gewürztraminer is. And if you want to make a complex wine with just a hint of, this rose petal, linalool. You don't need a lot of this very powerful wine to show that. Otherwise, it starts to become overpowering. And we get pretty, we get sort of creative as we're making these blends to say, oh, this is nice, but it's lacking maybe a floral character, or it's maybe lacking the tropical fruit character. So we're really aiming to find this complex blend of all these flavors. And that's what we end up with the varietals. And it's a very interesting thing to learn from somebody how to do that, because you're not born just knowing the skill. You really have to see and interact. We have this art of assemblage that JL does with our wine club members every year. And it's such a great way for people to see, like, wow, there's a lot of thought and technique that goes into that.
It's super insightful to hear your explanation, and it's very detailed, and JL's explanation is usually a lot more high level. So I love that contrast between your explanation between the two of you. Also, I love hearing about like the process of how the mentorship goes, because for me, as I coach and mentor younger chefs, restraint and patience is the number one thing I try to teach. And like light-handedness and elegance and like just that refinement comes from being patient, not rushing the cooking, letting it work, standing over the stove, smelling and understanding the chemistry of the food by your senses, not by a book or a recipe. And I love that the same thing kind of happens with winemaking, and for sure it's highlighted by the assemblage process. So awesome answer, thank you. I think that this kind of leads me into the next question, which is, you two have worked together for a decade. How does your work personality and contrast with JL, like what do you bring to the table that you think contributes to the process? And then what do you think JL had to, like, for lack of a better word, beat out of you as a younger winemaker, and now you're realizing as you mature, becoming much more established, and confident in the vineyard and in the winery? Like, what are some of the things you're like, yeah, now I get why that was done before?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think definitely I can always, and I say this to JL all the time, I thank him for the patience he had when I was young. I started at Stratus when I was 21 years old. So I was a super young guy. And as everyone is when they're that young, you're fresh out of school, you really think you can take over the world. Like, I remember thinking back then I could be a winemaker. You're just young. At that point in your life, you just really haven't failed yet. You haven't learned how to fail. So you think you can do anything. Everything is just,
right.
Just like you said with chefs. I remember thinking, like, there's just so much stuff I could do everything. And I remember JL kind of, saying, like, be patient. And we talked in the beginning about how many different jobs I've done at Stratus. Be patient, and you're going to sort of learn each one of these things one by one. And I remember around the time I became the vineyard manager is where I started to finally get it. It was like, that was the first time in my life I had so much responsibility, and it was like failure could be a thing. And up until then I felt bulletproof.
Yeah.
And I kind of understood like what it was to like maybe be, kind of an adult and have responsibility. And I thought, like, wow, thank God I listened back then and didn't rush out. And JL is very good with attention to detail and organization. So he's very good at helping me learn these types of nuanced things that I thought were definitely not, front of mind. And time always gives you, the benefit of time. You can always look back and say, wow, I remember how I felt back then. And it's very important in a membership and a mentorship to sort of slow that person down and help them focus on learning the tasks, as you said, one by one. And then you can start to put it all together, but you don't just have it all together right away. And that was kind of a funny thing. I always think back to those days of like what it was like, how patient JL was to have this young guy who was constantly just probably, irking him, like, let's I want to go and do this. And it's like, Dean, you're very opinionated. Let's hold off and let's see how it goes. And it was very smart of JL to do that. And I think I've learned a lot kind of learning from that.
I love it. JL, I'm curious to know if you've adjusted your process, having the energy of Dean and that kind of impatience of you nipping at the heels a little bit. Have you adjusted how you do things and learned anything from that mentorship process?
Well, I don't know how to put it, but it's kind of we've been married for now more than 10 years with Dean.
Yeah.
So everybody who has been in couple understand the concept of patience is an important thing, and on top of that, we have many tens of babies together. So it's a lot of, so it's a serious thing to be working that way. And, our babies have a gestation close to what elephants have, like 20 months, 22 months of gestation to be able to get your first baby. And we have 10s of them together. It's a lot of things. And sometimes it goes to 36 months, imagine. So it's a lot of thinking, a lot of things. The good news with all our babies is that they're pretty quiet. They like to lie in their room, quite quietly in the dark. So that's pretty rewarding as well to have babies like that, especially when you have 10s of them. But overall, it is a journey where I am not typically a very patient guy, but I am patient when it comes to a vine or a vineyard or picking grapes. And when I see someone great, I'm really going to hold my horses and be patient to be able to teach slowly to where Dean is now. So thanks, Dean, for your commitment and as well for your patience with me as well, I have to say, because I'm not the most patient guy, as you might have mentioned.
Yeah, I would add too, as JL mentioned, like a marriage kind of thing. Everyone knows the most important thing to a marriage is communication. And that's something that we always worked on through the years. That was really great with JL's experience. It makes it so easy with winemaking. I would say just the entire process of a bottle of wine, there's so much importance in communication, all the way from the workers in the vineyard to the workers in the winery, to the HR, to the sales, to the retail. It's one package that everybody's kind of coming together to sell. And certainly between a winemaker and a system winemaker or a vineyard manager or two winemakers working together, communication has always been sort of our best strength, I think. I've never had a fear if something went wrong or there was a mistake, to pick up the phone. JL knows right away. He's had some 3-4 a.m. phone calls from me before from, some craziness going on, to say, JL, this just happened, but I didn't want to let you sleep on it. Sorry, but let's deal with it right now rather than, wait or kind of hide it. And that's always been forefront of working together, is communication.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I think any successful organization would say the same thing. Quickly, I want to address a question about the food pairing. Julie asked about whether the lobster dish was specifically matched for this wine. Yes, so both dishes are specifically designed for the wines in front of you. And I did believe that the acidity and the structure of this white was definitely ready for a dish as rich as the appetizer, as well with a touch of the heat from the poblano cream and then the freshness from the phenamine. Yeah, this wine can hold up to almost anything, and I thought, like, why not go big on the appetizer as well? So I want to talk about what you said earlier about mistakes and failure, and ask you, Dean and JL, was there a particular blunder of a vintage of the past number of years that was a learning moment that stood kind of above other learning moments? Because I know for me in the kitchens, I always like to take missteps as opportunities to make sure that like people grow from it and learn from it and don't let it get them down. So I'm curious whether, like you said, there's no successes. For me, when I talk to chefs, I'll tell you how good you are by looking at all your mistakes. And I think that maybe the same applies for you guys.
Yeah. Well, the biggest mistake we always do is not trusting nature. Nature does a job, and sometimes you say, "Oh, it's not a good year. It's too cold. It's rainy on that." But then there is always a way nature compensates for that by having other traits that are positive. And the big issue we constantly have is to want to be too interventionist as winemaker. We want to make the wine. And really, the wine is made by nature, not by us. We just have to put it in the right way in the winery from grapes to bottle. And having too much intervention is never a good idea. So that's what I've been learning. I used to be a very intellectual winemaker working with numbers scientifically. Wine is being made scientifically. And now I'm more into an artist way of thinking, where you're allowed to make mistakes, but you correct them and the nature will correct them with you. So it's kind of a different way of functioning than I used to be when I was a young winemaker. It is more the art part of it is growing, and the numbers and the sounds is fading away. Dean, anything to add to that? I'm sure you have plenty of experience on this thing.
Yeah.
What happened at 3 a.m.?
The 3 a.m. I remember the 3 a.m. one is anything normally happening at 3 a.m. in the vineyard is almost always ice wine. It's always something going on wrong with ice wine. I think it was at the time, we pick everything by hand, ice wine wise, and maybe a team not showing up. Or actually, I do remember picking ice wine in the first year that I was a vineyard manager, JL. The machine wasn't fitting under the nets. We had brought the wire down, so it was a 3 a.m. call to say to JL, I think we had thought about picking by machine, and that's what actually partially what pushed us to picking ice wine by hand, is that our vineyard rows and the way we do viticulture at Stratus isn't conducive to a machine picking grapes in our vineyard at all, because we do keep the wire so low and machines are really meant for picking a higher canopy. So that was, I think, the 3 a.m. I remember calling JL at 3 a.m. and saying, I don't think that this is going to happen tonight. We're going to have to find like a team last minute. And we pulled it together. That was amazing. I think by 6 a.m. JL was there in his jacket. Our team of cellar people, we were all out there in jackets picking Riesling by hand in the vineyard. And it was like, you could imagine it was 2015. I was pretty nervous to like call JL and say like, the machine's not going to do it. We got to get some hand pickers out here. But we pulled it off that day. It was really fantastic. And in terms of winemaking, yeah, we never, knock on wood, we've been pretty lucky throughout the years. As JL said, it's usually the mistakes of not trusting, the nature and doing that. In terms of like, there was always small things for me as a young guy working for JL. You can imagine all the things he had to teach me about winemaking, but it was also the other things like human resources and paperwork and all the other stuff. And I remember a very first time I took over from maternity leave in 2011 for the lab. And so it was my very first week on the job. Like the lab tech went on maternity leave. I was young. I was 21 years old. And I'm thinking like, this is going to be good. And JL said, I need you to do a report on a comparative wine tasting. And I thought to myself like, okay, this is great. Comparative wine tasting for us is like, we taste some wines and our lab tech makes a report and some conclusions. And so as I'm doing it, I'm so young and I was so, ready to go. And I'm thinking like, JL is going to be so impressed by what I'm doing right now. He's going to like demand that I take a higher raise. Like, I just remember being so clueless. Like, he's just going to say, this guy, I'm going to come in the next morning. He's going to say, you know what? You're more knowledgeable than we thought. Here's more money. You're just amazing. Like I just sitting there. So I sent it off as an email before I left at the end of the day, doing this comparative tasting report. And I come in the next morning and there's like papers everywhere. And JL's like looking at me. He's like, where did you learn how to, print these things? I printed like 20 sheets coming out. You didn't set the print preferences. He just started going, about all these little attention to detail that I didn't get. And I just remember walking out like, wow, being an adult is suddenly hard. Like I'm right out of school. You've been told your whole life, like you're doing a good job. But it was so funny to see all these papers all over the place. Like I think probably 20 sheets came out from one Excel sheet. And I thought, this is what learning really is, like forget school. And I thought that was so funny because he had to be so patient that I didn't even think about these kinds of things. And that was really the early phases of learning to be a winemaker was a lot of that kind of stuff. It wasn't even about wine, vineyard and stuff. It's about the things she'll show me in terms of paperwork and HR.
I love it. We have a question from our good friend, Gord Cunningham. Now I'm going to ask him to unmute. He wants to ask you guys personally. Gord, go ahead.
Hi, Johnny. Did I get you?
Yeah, we hear you, Gord. Go ahead.
Great. Well, first of all, let me congratulate you once again on an absolutely fabulous dinner and great wine pairings. My question to the two folks is, what do they see as the future of, winemaking in Niagara? Is it going to be premised on, one or two or three varietals, or is the blending, which they're doing, by the way, which is terrific, is that kind of the way of the future for Niagara on the Lake wineries?
Good question. Go ahead,
Great
JL.
question. JL, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, the future is bright. That's what I can tell you. We are very preoccupied with climate change, and it is true. It's a serious problem in many ways, and it's a problem to us as well in the vineyard, as it brings more insect that we have never seen before. But at the same time, our vines are used to drought. They are originally from north of Iraq, semi-desertic areas. And therefore, they love to be warm and dry feed and so on and so forth. So yes, certainly, I hope the art of assemblage is the future, because this is a tradition. The wine was never made with the varietal once. You know, people would never talk about the variety. They would talk about their name, the name of their land, the name of their village. That was most important. So I hope we'll go back to that and not focus too much on varieties. But it's importantly, the varieties we grow are more and more varieties that are from southern climate. You know, we grow Syrah, we grow things like Tempranillo from Spain, Sangiovese from Italy. Of course, we have quite a bit of Bordeaux-oriented varieties such as Cap Franc, which is doing super well in our vineyard. We have a lot of that. But at the end of the day, nature showed us once again that we are not planting vineyard for the past, we are planting for the future. And the future tells us that the climate warming up, we are adapting our planting towards this future, the next 30 years, not the last 30 years, or not when we had a problem because we got miserable one year because it was a winter, a very bad winter, and it frost, and the vines were really unhappy. If we work for that one or two bad stories, we will never evolve. So we are growing towards the next 30 years. Dean, anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great answer. And you know, for me, I always think to predict or peer into the future, you almost always have to look into the past and say what happened and see what happened in the past. And I think Niagara has a long history of growing grapes, but really, it's long, but it's kind of modern. There's a modern time of growing grapes in Niagara and making wine in Niagara. My dad started a winery in 1978. But he wasn't a winemaker. In 1978, there was no potential to become a winemaker, really, if you're a Canadian, because there's no education and no way to do it. So the modernization is, you know, somebody like J.L. Groux, who came with this vision from the old world, educated from the old world, and saw when very few other people were even writing or thinking about Niagara at all, that there was this amazing potential to grow grapes in this climate. And so that was sort of the past. And what came from that was J.L. coming from France had studied in Bordeaux, studied in Burgundy, and I would say any major winemaking region in the world has a college, university, somebody to educate their homegrown talent, which didn't exist in the 70s and didn't exist when JL showed up. And by the time I came around, second generation from my dad, because of JL and because of the winemakers who sort of emigrated from Europe to Niagara, brought these, you know, ideas. We started this college, this university, and now today, most of the talent that you see in Niagara is educated and learning about Niagara right here at our colleges and universities, and also from winemakers like JL, who are sort of preaching this gospel of old world techniques, wines made in the vineyard, because that's not necessarily a new world concept so much. It's very old world. And I think what will happen to the question is that now we have these students all learning in this area, and we're learning about our region. You know, when JL showed up, there wasn't much information available to making wine in Niagara. It was kind of by the seat of your pants. With the experience and education you had. And now we have this groundwork. We're doing our own science at our colleges and universities, and we're really developing our own methods, as JL said, to go with climate change. I think definitely single varietals will be there always. And it's great that now these sort of winemakers who really know Niagara, they can call Niagara home, have sort of embraced Cabernet Franc. JL brought this experience of that from the Loire Valley, embraced Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling. So I think they'll all have a place, as well as the blends as well, because that's being taught, you know, in the classrooms right here in Niagara now. And that's just so important. Any region that wants to be, you know, respected on the world stage has to have these institutions to forge ahead and make better wine.
That's great. I'm glad you guys answered my climate change question. I always ask winemakers from different parts of the world, what is your strategy for addressing climate change with your growing in your vineyard? And I love that assemblage is an answer to that, because of course, you know, that makes complete sense. Whereas answers I've gotten from other wineries have varied dramatically. Like when you ask the winemaker Chateau Moussard in Lebanon, he's like, I'm buying land at higher elevation. And then you ask people in California, like in Napa Valley, they're like, we can't buy more land. We need people to stop driving cars. Like, and like, there's a different approach from different parts of the world. And I think that we're fortunate, I guess, in Ontario here that, you know, we're young enough and we're nimble enough to adjust in new ways. So that's really cool. A couple questions I want to address here, maybe they're kind of related, is like, Jeremy asked, what are you tasting for in assemblage? Like what's in the process, and then what is the delta between different varieties? So how do you decide the percentage points the blend. I think JL addressed this a little bit with his talk about small percentages of Gewürztraminer, et cetera. But I'm curious, what do you think? When you're tasting, what are you tasting or smelling for? And then how do you put some of those pieces of the puzzle together? I know it's not an easy question to answer, but maybe you could just give us a high level. And again, before it gets too late, I think we should also talk about the Stratus Red we have in our glass. And maybe that's a good concrete example for you to use in that to answer that question.
You want to start, Dean?
No, go ahead, Joe. You start.
Okay. Well, the assemblage process is super important. We spend weeks, months to do that. Dean alluded that we were spending 2 or 3 months creating a wine only. And it's important to realize that there is so many possibilities. We have so many lots, and it's not only about variety, it's about sub-terroir that we have in our vineyard. We have 45 different lots, sub-lots in our own vineyard, so mini Burgundy, if you want, in there. And all of that is being kept separate. So when we are starting to make the assemblage after 1 or 2 years in barrels, or not in barrels, depending, can be on amphora as well, we have a lot of choice to go with. And whatever you would do with math and physics will never get you to the result. The only way to do it is by tasting different combinations and try that. And you do it once, and then the next day you try, you learn from what you did the day before, because you taste blind, but then you look at the results, and then you build on that. And as you build slowly, you're getting into what we call the best wine of the year. And the best wine of the year is never the best barrels together or the best wines together. That never works. It's totally unpredictable. It's something, synergies between wines are something you only can find by tastings and many tastings. And these synergies are things such as you would think like, oh, this wine is not going to make it, or that wine is not very good. And that's why tasting blind is important, because if you start to intellectualize the whole process, you are going to lose. You are going to lose the best opportunities. So by leaving your palate and your nose leads you to what fits together without any preconceived idea is really the great way to be able to make the best wines. I'm sure you have more to say.
Yeah, well, I would just add, and to that point, a good comment Jail's always making is you don't want to close any doors. And so a lot of the winemaking process it's almost like setting up the perfect play. If it was a sport or something like that, you're really thinking, or if it's a chess match, you're kind of thinking not about the move you're making right now, but 5 moves ahead. And a lot of that comes in the winemaking process in the beginning at harvest. You're setting yourself up for exactly what Jail's talking about, all these different wines to choose from. And when you're making the wine, October, November, December, you're trying not to close any doors or close too many doors. And what I mean by that is taking another block of Cab Franc and maybe blending it with a different block at that moment, just for tank space or convenience. Jail's always looking at me and saying, are you doing that because it's the most convenient for you, or are you doing it because it's for the good of the wine? And then you have to sit back and say, yeah, you're right. Actually, I was just trying to kind of get that out of the way. I want some space or whatever, but to make better wine, you're right. I'll keep them separate so that in a year or 2 years from now, we'll be able to choose what the best wine is for that blend. Because as Jail mentioned, it's so important. And I never would have believed that in a million years. The best wines, as Jail said, almost exclusively never make the best wine when blended together. You're always thinking that, like, we kind of, you start out and you might say, I think I already have my ideas of what wine should go in that blend, and we'll try it and then we'll put it in blind against, our control wine. And you're always shocked to find like, wow, that wine was the one I was really expecting would be incredible, but it never works out that way. It's completely unpredictable. Yeah, it's so important to set yourself up for success early.
Dean, now that you've been there making wine for 10 years, tell me, is there any through line vintage to vintage, a Stratus character that needs to be maintained? Like when people make champagne, like the house has a style, and they make their wines to match that style, and they want to create as little variation from vintage to vintage as possible. I know that's not your approach, but is there a particular through line that all Stratus Reds need to have this character, or all Stratus Whites need to have this like structure? And is there something to be maintained, or is it vintage to vintage, whatever the ground is saying?
I think there's definitely a style that you're shooting for, but there's almost more important than that, because we do talk about that. We talk about the complexity and maybe the, you know, the mouthfeel of the Stratus white and whatnot. But I would say more important to, I guess, our style is to really like what we're trying to ensure every year is almost like that the next wine is almost better. You know, we always put blind the bottled wine from the previous vintage, and you sort of ask yourself, like, is this wine as good or better or not as good? And the idea, especially to keep moving forward in innovation, keep moving forward as a winery, you're always looking to get better. And that's not to say that the 2007 you're going to assume is not as good as the 2010 just because it's different, you know, it's newer. But that's the idea of the making wine. We're constantly trying to improve to make the wine better than the last, so that in 100 years, Stratus wines are just the best wine you could ever imagine, the best, you know, in the world. So a lot of that goes into, at least my thinking when we're in the wine, is benchmarking against a previous vintage that you did. And if it's better, then you're always moving in this linear motion forward. And as you know, the one thing, and JL always points out to this, is there's consumers have their preference, and there's always sort of the whisper of what's the big thing right now. And it's kind of important not to really listen to that, because if you're constantly chasing what, you know, you think the consumers want, or what the current trend or whatever the fad is, you're going to be all over the map. You're just never going to have any consistency. So it's kind of about this sort of, as an artist would painting a painting, you're really painting that almost for yourself, but for your, you know, for the people to view and for everyone to see your expression of art. And I think that's our wine as well. You're not trying to listen to the whispers of what, you know, the next big thing is. You're just trying to show what you think is the best wine from your vineyard.
Yeah, great answer. I have a couple questions from the crowd here I'm going to address first. One is from my parents, which I love. They asked, is all of your wine grown on your property, all the varietals, or do you purchase from outside? And like, I think JL mentioned it earlier, but how many varietals is it?
Well, we have about 16 varieties, but yes, it's an estate grown. Everything we make is from Stratus. So what you see the name Stratus, it's from our vineyard or from our 56 acres. And this is our land, this is our paradise, and we are really a steward of that land that has been brought to us by glaciers over thousands of years. From the entire North Ontario have been scraped out to bring us the best land. That's why it's very diversified as well. You know, it has enormous complexity, because you can have a rock of granite beside a rock of limestone and shale side by side. And that is very unusual to have that. You know, only glaciers can carry things like that all the way in one spot. And having that, we have this wonderful complexity coming from the soil, which is deep, so the roots can go deep as well. So all of that do bring us the complexity we're looking for in the wine.
Awesome. Question from Robin asks, I would love to know how phenols in varieties challenge the blend in the assemblage of the finished wine. So maybe you can explain what phenols are, and then how that might be challenging in creating an assemblage style wine.
Dean, you want to go through that?
Yeah, go ahead, JL. You're on that topic, so go for that, and that's a good one to explain, and I'll chime in.
Yeah, phenols, typically, when you talk about phenols, it's a lot to do with what we call tannins, color, you know, all these things in wines are all phenols, and they are extremely important, specifically on red wine. And we have been adapting our techniques actually to get more phenols, because the grapes turn colored in August, so to get the red. But really, these phenols are being created very early July already in the berry. And by removing leaves very early from the front of the grape, we have plenty of leaves on top of the canopy, but in front of the grapes, we want to remove all the leaves to expose the grapes to the sun, and that's going to create phenols, going to create more tannins, more color, more structure for the wine in the long term. So again, it's not us winemakers creating phenols in the winery. We can only babysit them to the right place and make sure we're not going to miss the boat on that. But they are there when the grapes arrive. And if they are not there, we're not going to make miracle in the winery. So therefore, doing all that work in the vineyard, tendering each vine about 20 times, and we have 65,000 of them. Even we are a small vineyard, it's a lot of vines that we have. So it's super, super important.
Yeah, and I'd add that,
Dean, you want to add to that?
The helpful part to what JL's saying, to play the winemaker part, is also what we do in the winery, being gravity flow and gentle pressing with our basket press to make sure that we're capturing the right phenols and that we're not over pressing or having press fractions that are maybe too phenolic and not balanced in the wine as well. So it's kind of, again, setting yourself up for success. You're working on it in the vineyard. You have this idea in mind of what you need to do for leaves, for sunlight, to get the phenols. And then when the wine is made, this is where I always say, you know, a winemaker cannot make premium, amazing wines from bad grapes. So our number one goal is always have the best grapes you could possibly have in the Stratus vineyard. But it's certainly easy for a winemaker to screw up really good grapes. We never want that to happen, but that's where our job is, to not screw up. I always say that's my number one job at Stratus, is don't screw up what nature gave us and all the hard work we did in the vineyard. And so that's where we make the gravity flow work, the gentle press cycles that we have to really capture the cuvee or the heart of these wines, so that you get them here in the glass and you're not getting, you know, an overly unbalanced phenolic note because of something we did wrong in the winery.
Great, great answer. Couple questions. I'd like to try to get to all of them, but one from Jeremy, which I find interesting. How do you know what to plant if you don't know how they're going to interact? And I guess that asks a bigger question. How did you choose, JL, what was planted at Stratus so many years ago? And are you planting anything new and different for the future?
Yeah, well, we had all the answers, that's for sure. We knew a bunch of variety that was doing well in Niagara already, but we did plant some daring ones, but not completely based on who cares. We know, for example, in our vineyard, because of the location, not because it's Niagara, but in our location, Pinot Noir will not do well. Pinot Noir will do very well in other part of Niagara. So we planted varieties that were adapted to our climate to start with, our own microclimate. And as well, we tried new things. You know, research and development is a big thing for us. Innovation is important, so we always do new things. So we planted a bunch of varieties that we thought were going to do well, and actually most of them did. One of them didn't work out. We thought there was something wrong with it, but really, no, it was the wrong climate, the wrong place to plant it. But it's Mauvais. But we planted things like Sangiovese, which was very daring back then. And now Sangiovese is one of the favorite of viticulturists. She keeps saying that's great, year after year is producing wonderful things. So there is new things to be discovered. You know, we have a moving climate, a changing climate, but as well, we are in Niagara and we have to discover more things. At the beginning, people thought, oh, you can grow Riesling because this is really cool climate. But in fact, Niagara is not as cool climate as you would think it is. We're at the latitude of Tuscan. We are south of Bordeaux in latitude. We have a lot of heat units in the growing season. You know, from June to September, we have more heat units than Bordeaux. So it's very important to realize of that. We're not growing grapes now in winter. You know, look at the vineyard behind me. It's empty. There's nothing there. So don't worry about it. What's important is when from May to September, October, that's when we are preoccupied. And we have a lot of heat units that we all know in our suburbs here. And that's what allows us to make some fantastic red wine year after year.
Yeah, super interesting that Sangiovese is the winner. And then someone asked, Paul and Chris asked specifically of Tannat. They hadn't heard of it before, and they're curious about that varietal. Are you having success with Tannat, and where is it from originally?
It originates from the southwest of France, you know, southwest of southeast of Bordeaux, if you want. And it has a funny name called Tannat. It reminds you of tannins, right? And it's very true. Myself, I didn't know it very well when we planted it. I knew it would be fairly well adapted to our climate, but what I didn't know is why would people call it Tannat? And Tannat means tannic, too rough, you know, rough in your mouth. And really, Tannat doesn't have that much tannins. What it has a lot of, which I discovered, is a lot of acidity. And acidity and tannins are not very good friends in your mouth. They are very good friends to age wine. They are the two main things to age wine, probably. But when they are young, in your mouthfeel, they don't agree together. They fight each other. So it's important. That's why people call it Tannat, thinking, well, it's because of the tannins, where the reality it was because of the acidity. So it's a variety that is a very good friend of Stratus Red. You can see it's part of that wine we have, the 2018 now. We have Tannat in there, and it's very often the case. It's a good assemblage friend, and it's doing well. It doesn't like our winters, so sometimes it's pissed off about winters, but always recovers happily and keep making Tanat year after year. So it's an interesting variety, not completely obscure. And we make sometimes Tanat pure wine. If you are checking on our web wine club, you will be aware when Tanat is showing up, because once in a while we have Tanat once every other year. Sometimes it goes in this wine, in the Stratus red, but sometimes we make it as varietals as well, or both.
Amazing. Yeah, super. I mean, I love it. Before we come approaching the end of the chat here, and I love all the questions. We're so happy with the engagement. I'd love to throw it to Suzanne so she can let everybody know how to get your hands on these wines if you want more of them. Suzanne, take it away.
Thank you, John. Well, first, I just have to say, I've been working alongside JL and Charles Baker, who's on the call, since the day we started. And there's so many of you on this call that we met, and you've been drinking our wine since our very first vintage, 2000. And it's such a joy to have you all here. And I wish you would turn on your camera so I can blow kisses. But some of you we haven't seen in such a long time, and it's just, you conjure, there we go. You conjure up a lot of memories and a lot of moments that we've shared together at the winery. And I know many of you who are on the call have shared your own very special occasions with us. So thank you. It's great to see that our journey is really a big part of a community. And yeah, it's very gratifying. And God, we're so lonely. So it's great to have everybody, like we have 153 people at least on this call, which is pretty cool. And thank you just to the Ascari group, because you guys do an exceptional job of putting this together. I think Eric and I and Charles, we were all sort of clairvoyant, thinking, oh, here comes another lockdown. My goodness, what can we do? And bing, bang, boom, and it's done. And we're enjoying this tonight. So thank you so much to all of you and your team. We're really pleased tonight. We've made new friends at Somm with Jennifer and Carrie, and they're on the call today, but they have a really engaging program. If you're a wine lover and you need to have wine concierge in your pocket on your phone, and you want to get some special perks. So for tonight, we thought it would be fun to put a vertical offer together for all of you who are part of tonight's experience, as well as the Somm membership. So we have a vertical trio of Stratus Red and Stratus White, going back vintages behind this one. So 17, 16, 15 white and 17, 16, 15 red. And for those of you kind of following vintages, those years were so remarkably contrasting in terms of, you know, the heat units and the climate, and the assemblage are quite different. So it's a really fun idea to pick up one of these trios or both and get a few more friends when we're allowed that starting Monday, and have a vertical together and really explore this concept of assemblage and how it can change, and you know, how the pairings may or may not work with different things based on the varietal composition and so on. So we're pretty excited about that. Those wines, of course, the 16s and 15s are definitely from our library. We always hold back a few things so we can reopen them as the time moves on. And some of them are actually featured in our own program, which we launch the 30th of every month, called The Last Drop. So I'm sure some of you are following those. And sometimes we pull out the last 2 or 3 bottles of something from 2007 or 2010 and so on. So definitely take advantage of this opportunity with Somm tonight. I just see in the chat that Mamie and Peter have just opened their last bottle of 2000, or was it a white? Must have been the white, because we didn't even make a 2000 red. So that's awesome. The wines, you know, they are definitely age-weighted. Tonight we're drinking the youngest, you know, rookies in the ring. But believe us, these will carry on, and I'm actually pretty pleased with how, in their youthful state, they really are showing a bright pairing with your beautiful food tonight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Suzanne. I'd like to give Jan an opportunity to introduce yourself to the crowd here and talk about what Somm's all about, because I think if you're on this call and you love the wine and food in front of you, I think Somm has a ton to offer.
Amazing, thank you, and thanks for having me on here tonight. And we're brand new to the Toronto tech scene, female-led, founded tech company. We're all about great lifestyle wine, food, and culinary experiences. And we've been lucky to be partnered with the Ascari Hospitality Group for a little while now, and we have lots of exciting things in the works with all the different Ascari restaurants, specifically through Somm Crew and Grand Cru. And then more recently with Stratus, and you know, Stratus was the first winery that I fell in love with when I moved to Toronto 11 years ago. So it's fantastic that Stratus is now part of Somm as well, and really hope that everyone here on the call tonight has a chance to check out the app. It's available in both Android and iOS. It's like having a sommelier in your pocket. And then we're really building this very cool kind of partner-driven physical experience through Somm Crew and Grand Cru. So you can unlock all sorts of cool experiences at our restaurant partners, hotel partners, winery partners, agency partners, lifestyle brands. It's awesome. You'll have fun with it. It's absolutely delicious. And we're so thankful for the partnership with both Ascari and Stratus.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen, so much. And I see that one of my favorite people has decided to show his face on the call. Charles, hello. Can you say hello to your many adoring fans here this evening?
I'm trying to avoid the chocolate, so I get some but I'm very grateful that a winery was built and growing grapes to suit the pairing of duck confit, because
yes.
It's, you know, it increases my consumption of your duck confit dramatically. Hi everyone, hello neighbors across the street. We can see you through the kitchen window. No, it's really simple. You know, we opened this winery in 2005 on the premise of wines that we grow and wines that express our place. And at the time, we were really excited about eventually seeing a body of work, but that takes time. And, you know, a winemaker may have 40 or 50 vintages by the time they're done, 40 or 50 if they're lucky, 60. So to overlap with winemakers that transition and take the work forward is for us, for Suzanne, myself, and our team. I think Stephen is on the call here too, and maybe even David. Just to see the continuum that's happening here is really important, because, you know, we don't like shiny objects. We like steadfast and true and winemaking that just sticks to it. And everybody that works at that winery, whether they live in the city or they work in the retail bar, they're all farmers at heart, because we live and die by what happens every single day and night of the year. Outside here in Toronto, I'm looking out at, you know, 15 below, and JL said earlier that they pay attention this summer, but you better believe that they're paying attention right now to temperatures and what happens out there. This is a very real thing. These are vineyards that, you know, we're basically getting the vineyard into a bottle. And the pandemic be damned, when we first had our first experience with the lockdown 2 years ago, and all of our friends like you had to lock their doors. We couldn't even get our vineyard workers out there to prune. So we had logistics people and delivery drivers all jump in and manage the vineyard for us until we could be manned up. And I think after a couple of years of this, it really shows what it takes to put these wines in a bottle. And from the day I started carrying a sample bag to you down at Izakaya or Table 17, or wherever it was back in, you know, the early years of 2005, 2006. Right? It's about getting in the bottle, and terroir includes not just climate and place, it includes our partners like you. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I love you, John. I love you, Eric. And thanks so much for including us once again. And
Charles, a pleasure. And I got to say thank you to, of course, most importantly, everyone who purchased this experience and joined us for this call. I think I'm going to say this is our #1 attended discussion of the pandemic. We're going out with a bang. We love it. It's like over 74 participants tonight. It's amazing. Thank you in particular, I'll say, to the entire team at Ascari, from our marketing team to logistics to the kitchen to Blair, our wine director, to obviously my partner Eric, everyone who helps put this together. It takes a team of dozens of people to make this happen. And then, of course, specifically thanks to Suzanne and the team at Stratus. JL and Dean, of course, yeah, I know you're the stars of the show here, but really we know who the workers are. We know who makes this happen and gets it done. And Suzanne and her team, to new relationships with Jennifer. Of course, there's going to be a ton of news about what we're working on with Somm, so we're excited about that. Yeah, and thanks to everyone. Honestly, great conversation. I apologize we couldn't get to all the questions tonight, but we don't want to drag this on too long. We always say 1 hour, and we're well past that now. So thank you for all your comments and engagement and participation. And I'm gonna throw it to Kathleen for a final thank you. We're really grateful to have everyone on the call, and we're grateful for your support. Our restaurants are open next week. Please come and have dinner. We're so excited to have you all back in seats at the bar, having fun, drinking Stratus, eating duck confit, eating lobster, eating a nice pasta. We're really excited to open the restaurants again and put this behind us. And we couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity to stay connected with you guys through it like this. So thank you, everybody. Keep the comments coming. And I'm going to say good night and thank you specifically to Dean and JL for the engaging conversation. And we can't wait to see you all in person. Please visit Stratus this summer, buy some wine, and see the place for yourself. It's a stunning facility. Technologically advanced, yes, but the place is beautiful. So please go and enjoy that on your own. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. I'll throw it to Kathleen for a final thank you.
Thanks, John.
I just have to echo what John said there. Huge thanks to everybody for participating. To all of our loyal audience and patrons, we hope to see you at the restaurants very soon in person. We at Ascari are so passionate about hospitality, and we just love having you at our tables. My light just went out, so sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but we love hearing your feedback. Let us know what you want to see more of. We love to custom design all of our experiences, whether they're private events or by the company on these platforms. But otherwise, we only are able to continue doing what we do because of your unwavering support. So thank you. Good night, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Check out our website. Bye, everybody.
Night. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.